Welcome again, everybody. We are recording the session, as I think you've already been told. And if you're here for the iReady workshop for out-of-school time providers, you're at the right place. My name's Kari. I'm one of the co-directors of the Agenda for Children. I also am connected to the Cambridge Public Schools as an administrator. And so we will have these two worlds converge today to support all of you in attendance, and by an extension, and most directly supporting our young people who attend our programs. Next slide. So just a quick overview of our agenda today. I'm going to go over a framing, talking about both some of the perspectives from the district and from the agenda, some of the objectives, logistics, and grounding for today's workshop. Then I'll be handing it over to my colleagues, Jen and Siobhan, to talk about iReady, sort of the why, the what, and the how. We'll have some breakout groups for discussion so you all can share your own thoughts and practices, possibilities, barriers, potential resources. We'll do a share out, have a block at the end for Q&A, and then review some of the resources that have already been put together around iReady. Next slide, please. So quick introductions, I already did myself, so let me pass it over to Jen Amagon.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you all today on Zoom. As Kari said, we are a little Zoom rusty. We're really not on Zoom much these days. So bear with us as we kind of go back to using Zoom today. So my name is Jennifer Amagon, and I oversee assessment and accountability for CPS. And I'm so happy to be here. And I just wanted to say next to the right of me is Emily Bryan, who's our ELA and literacy coordinator. She's actually sick and cannot join us today. And I will say she's kind of our fierce, our brave leader of this work. So we're all kind of stepping in. She really holds a lot of the expertise. But I think we'll hopefully be able to cover kind of what she would normally cover today. But I just wanted to name that. And before I pass over to Siobhan, I actually realized we have two other members of our team who are with us today. Zena and Sean, do you just want to kind of come off mic and just introduce yourselves?
Hi, everyone. My name is Zena, and I'm the network associate. I also work at the Agenda for Children, supporting the team behind the scenes with slideshows and resource guides and things like that.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sean Proctor, elementary school out-of-school time network coordinator.
Thank you. Critical members of the team. Okay, Siobhan.
Hello, everybody. So happy to see everybody here. So as Jen mentioned, my name is Siobhan Mulligan. I am the director of math for Cambridge, and I'm so happy that she introduced Emily, our fearless leader, who is not here because, again, as Jen has stated, we are definitely stepping in to give the information that Emily knows inside and out, but I think we've been around long enough to give that information in a valuable way as well. So just a little bit of grace as we get used to Zoom again, and also fill you in on information that may be directly her department. I guess we will just hand it back to Kari at this point.
Yes, thank you, Siobhan. Next slide, please. So you heard from our Cambridge Public Schools colleagues there. Just a reminder, and I'll be going through these slides somewhat rapidly, but just to set context, and also we will be sharing these slides out and sharing this recording out later, so folks have these artifacts to know how we've come together to do this work and set these goals around iReady and our other collaborative ways of supporting students. So, this workshop is brought to you in part by the Agenda for Children out of school time. And just wanted to remind folks, we offer training such as this. We do communities of practice. We have networks. We run a symposium annually. We do coaching, newsletters, practitioners, blogs, a whole lot of other resources. You can find our website and our social media channels. And you see our mission over here. I will not read it out loud. It's there for the documentation. Next slide, please. So in the spirit of the Agenda for Children, of course, we have something we need you to do in the chat. So could you please, in the chat, enter your name, your title, and your email. your program or your organization, and then as applicable, the schools that most of your students attend, if you could say if it's one school, one or two or three, or if you like, we have students from everywhere, you could say that. And then lastly, if you could put your emoji of the moment. The hands making the heart sign is how I'm feeling about everybody being here this morning. So that's for you. There you go. Thanks, Siobhan. And this helps us capture attendance, just to be clear. So if you can do any combination of what you see up here, that would be terrific. I see some people getting in the chat. All right. Next slide. So the agenda for children, we like to set the tone and set the context and space consistently with our beliefs. One that I'll just point out today is number 5. So it's all people have the capacity for change and growth. When adults who work with youth are provided with opportunities for continuous learning, clear expectations, and accountability, there's a positive impact on opportunities and experiences for youth. And I think this is very true with all the different stakeholders and programs and different roles we have here today to think about ways to support young people going forward. Next slide. We also have ways of being, and we practice anti-racism in our relationships with one another. I think today just want to just point out the idea of being present, trying to keep your full attention on this Zoom and on the content we're covering, being present for your breakout group, and helping along the way with good questions. Next slide, please. So the other thing is, you may have heard us say, and for folks who are newer to the Agenda for Children, we are a citywide intermediary. And so what does that mean? And what does that mean in the context of this workshop? I just want to say quickly, so we work to link between system, program, and youth outcomes, and we are using this tri-level theory of change, if you will, as a guiding framework shared with the Every Hour Counts kind of nationwide coalition of out-of-school time intermediaries. And I bring this up because if you see in the middle, actually, let me do this the other way around. So we're looking across multiple programs, across schools. This iReady platform was rolled out district-wide. Every school, grades 3 to 8. So it's really a systems level initiative. And that type of work takes a certain amount of commitment and a certain amount of orchestration. We have you here today because you all run programs. And we want to understand what it takes at a program level to also support access to iReady and tools that support our young people's learning in this case. And at the crux of it, really the core of it, this is all about young people and what happens for them and outcomes for them. And we just see how all of these things are linked. And that is really important for us as we approach this work as the Agenda for Children in partnership with the Cambridge Public Schools and also as a community overall with you. Next slide, please. I'll just point out here, this was a recent sort of, I guess, graphic that was put together based on strategic planning and district planning with the public schools. What I'll point out here, again, without reading all the way through it, is there's I guess, a reiterated emphasis on the importance of family and community partnerships, which is what we are bringing folks together today to also enhance. And that we're looking at ways to support all types of learning outcomes for both in school and beyond after school, if you will. Next slide. And here's a graphic that a colleague of mine, I don't know if she's on here, Maggie, but recently attended, I think, the Summer Learning Network National Conference. And they talked about this continuum of types of partnerships. I'll just bring it up again as a point of reference, something we have used in the past with the Agenda for Children in different spaces. But just to be clear, there are partnerships that are really, if you start at the left here, the ad hoc sort of informal one-time events. So at first blush, this may feel like that's what this is, but really it's important to understand this is not just a one-off. We are trying to take this work and carry it forward with you and together. And at the same time, it's not just a transactional thing. We're not just trying to exchange, hey, you do iReady and we'll get the data back, or, you know, just have the students do this work. No, this is about cooperative work, collaborative work, and hopefully transformative work as well. And so again, I won't read through everything on this slide, but this is to give you a sense of really what we aspire for is on the transformative side of this continuum. Next slide. Thanks. So a little bit about today in terms of objectives. And as I just mentioned, this is an initial session on ways we can deepen how we partner together to support students' literacy and math literacy skills and progress. Throughout, please use the chat space to ask questions. We will be collecting those. We will have an actual Q&A session towards the end of the workshop. And then if there's things that we are not answering, we will also add them to an FAQ document that's already been started. And we're recording this session so that we can share it with other people in your program and in the community. Next. All right, so we're gonna kind of ground, if you will, this jump off with a couple of Zoom poll questions, or we're gonna attempt to. So this first one, and there's a button, it should say polls on the bottom, the footer of your Zoom window. And so we have two questions. If we could answer both of them, I'll read them out loud for folks, just so they know what it says. So the first one is, students use online tools to support their learning during my program or programs. And so you have a choice of three things there: all the time, occasionally, or no. And then the second one is, I am familiar with the iReady Diagnostic and understand the information it provides. And again, you have three choices: yes, totally, a little bit, or not really. So if we could just take a couple minutes to weigh in on those, it's going to help us to understand sort of what our jump off is here. This is anonymous. Starting to see at least with the first question, about a quarter of the folks reporting are saying all the time students are using online tools. That means 3/4 are occasionally or no. It's about 30% of folks are saying no, they are not. And you're not asking why at this point, just getting a sense. I'll say this, that we know through many years of working with out of school time and summer and after school programs that you all support learning in so many different types of ways. It's not just the online tools. We are asking specifically about online today, but in some ways, that's why we really feel fortunate to be able to partner with you, because you already support learning in so many different ways. So we're just trying to see if we can add another tool to your utility belt. Okay, looking at the second question, we're seeing that there are two people who are totally familiar. I wonder if that's Jen and Siobhan. No, that's good to know. We have some people with exposure, and then some people in the middle, like about 50% have a little bit of information about iReady, and then not really is all good. That's what we're here for. All right, why don't we, I guess we can end the poll. Actually, let me get a little, make sure we save it. Oh yeah, we can share the results. All right, so we can close the poll. And I'm gonna hand it to, sorry, we're just trying to get it closed. Is it closed? Is it just me that's not closed? All right, are we good?
Sorry, a second, we're good now.
Okay, no, it's fine. All right, so with this wonderful group of young people waving at us and so ready to be their best selves, I'm gonna hand it to Jen to get us into the why iReady, what is iReady, who is it for, how does it work, etc. So Jen, it's all yours.
Thank you, Kari. And for those who are newly joining us, my name is Jen Amagon, and I oversee assessment and accountability for Cambridge Public Schools. I'm so happy to be here today, and thank you for coming. Next slide, please. Okay, so this graph helps explain the why a little bit behind iReady. So what this graph shows is MCAS scores. So MCAS is our state assessment in Massachusetts, and students in grades 3 through 10 take it every spring. And it's really to show how students are demonstrating kind of mastery of the state standards, understanding of the state standards in math, literacy, and science. So what this first graph does is it shows the percent of students who are really kind of meeting and exceeding expectations across the district in English language arts in 2019, which is the dark blue, and then in 2022, which is the lighter group. The lighter blue. And what we do is we're showing it by all the different demographic groups that the state reports upon. And that band at the top shows the difference between 2019 and 2022. The point that we're trying to make here, and I'm sure you're all well aware of this, is that it's just the impact of COVID on our young students. And that impact is really felt across the board, but most pronounced among some groups of our students. So I use the pink box here just to outline our low-income students. So you can see that 39% of our low-income students across 3 through 8 in 2019, pre-pandemic, were meeting and exceeding expectations on the ELA MCAS. In 2022, last spring, that number shifted to 27% of our low-income students. Meanwhile, non-low-income students, 72% of those students met or exceeded expectations in 2019, and that shifted just 1 percentage point in 2022. So the point here is that there's disparate incomes, disparate impacts across the board for different demographic groups from COVID, and we see a widening opportunity gap playing out. So this, I know it's a lot of data, but I wanted to share a little bit of the why of, iReady being one of many tools to kind of help address what we're seeing in the data. Next slide, please. And I won't go into the same level of detail. This is the same graph, but for math. So you can see that in math, as I talked about for ELA, there's a 10 percentage point shift from 2019 pre-pandemic to 2022, we're still in COVID for our low-income students. And we actually saw for non-low-income students, performance actually increased in that time period. So again, disparate impacts, and we want to make sure that all students have the opportunity to achieve at the high levels we know that they're capable of. But we know that COVID had tremendous impacts for our students. Next slide, please. Okay. So what is iReady personalized instruction? iReady personalized instruction was rolled out just this last November. So I think it was around November 8th, 2022. Since then, we've had engagement. We've trained teachers. We have done some online sessions with families and caregivers. And now this is an opportunity to engage with all of you around what this is. It is available to 3rd through 8th graders. And we're really focused on out of school time, that this is really supplemental to the school day. So it's really intended to extend learning beyond the school day. It can be used after school, it can be used in school, but that is not really our focus. After school, on weekends, during school vacations, when students are absent. I've actually just been talking to a school this morning about a student going on sabbatical, and it can be used in all of those ways just to help extend learning in all of these spaces, knowing that not every student has access to, a tutor or, adult at home when they get home to kind of support learning. iReady personalized instruction provides targeted lessons to meet the needs of students regardless of where they are. We'll get into it in a little bit, but students take a test, a diagnostic test that places them, and then the program kind of adjusts to that data to kind of teach them the skills that they need support on and extend kind of, and it's not just to support students who are below grade level, but also extend learning for students who are above grade level. It provides caregivers with instant access to student learning data. So parents can kind of look at their student data and understand where they are. And we've been really intentional in sharing data with families so that they're alongside us with the learning journey and can support students as needed. Next slide, please. Oh, I didn't realize we had that fade in. Okay, great. But it all begins, oh, Siobhan.
No, I was going to take over if you were done, but go ahead, keep going.
Okay. So the platform really begins with a test, which is called the iReady Diagnostic. And students are tested in the fall. And then again, right now, we're actually in the winter testing window. And it basically tests students on all the critical domains in literacy and math. And then like I said, it provides educators, caregivers with information on each student's strengths and areas for growth. It's computer adaptive, meaning it adapts as students answer questions. So if a student starts struggling and getting some questions wrong, the computer adapts and adjusts to where a student is, and likewise if a student is doing well. It's aligned with MCAS and with our state standards. And as I said, it's given in the fall and winter of every year. It is not used for grades at all. This is truly formative data intended to support students where they are. And it is also one of many, many tools that educators use to understand our students. It's not high stakes. It is really intended to support students where they are. Next slide, please. And I'll hand it over to Siobhan.
Thank you. And again, for those of you who are just joining us, my name is Siobhan Mulligan, and I am the Director of Math for Cambridge. And so basically what Jen was explaining are these diagnostics and the information that they give to educators and to families. And we really want to emphasize that we're really trying to make sure that families are engaged in this process. And so the reports do include reading and math domains. When the students take the diagnostic, these reports are sent home and they are assessed in certain math and reading domains. Again, because I'm the math person, I'm going to try my best to fill in for the reading portion. And Jen, please feel free to jump in wherever I'm missing something important. So the first three, if I remember correctly, are critical. And we're looking at the ELA domains right now because they influence students' overall comprehension. If they're struggling with comprehension, it's because they have a gap in knowledge and skills in one of these first few domains. And we need to address it with targeted instruction. When we look over onto the math, we can go to the next slide, sorry. We have a few domains here, numbers and operations, algebra and algebraic thinking, measurement and data, geometry. And basically it's just asking, can your students add and subtract, or can the students add and subtract? Can they create patterns? How are they interacting with the math? And it takes them all the way from the 3rd grade level up into the 8th grade level. So really just hitting these domains at all levels. Next slide, please. Thank you. Second. Okay, so now that the students and their teachers have all the information about their academic strengths and specific areas for improvement, what can we do together to support their progress is really the question, right? So what happens next is something called personalized instruction. So they have this information and now a plan gets created for them by the program that really hones in on the areas that they need specific work on. Okay, moving on. One of the things I know, if Emily was here, she usually kind of tells a story about her childhood. And one of the things that she always likes to uplift is the fact that she didn't necessarily feel successful at one point in life. And if she had a program like this, she would feel very successful because it allowed her to work on her own learning individually because she didn't necessarily feel that she had the correct supports at home. So this program is really helpful for those who may not have additional supports at home and gives them a chance to be the independent learners that we know that they can be. The other piece I know we usually uplift is that we support this program, but we don't support it because it's perfect. It is not perfect. There is no program that is perfect, just like no educator is, right? So the program finds exactly the domains where a student is struggling, and it begins by targeting those greatest areas of need. Because of this, students may find it difficult at first and may be frustrated, or they may ask, why is it giving me this easy work, right? I know this. So we don't know exactly where it's going to land at first. And if they do indeed know it, the program will adapt and then move them forward. Next slide, please. Close reading of complex grade appropriate text is critical and proven to result in big gains in students' reading achievement. That's why the text in this program are challenging, but they are also relevant and engaging, and that's really important. It really captures the children's attentions, and they seem to overall enjoy it. Next slide. So they're grounded in excerpts from real novels that represent diverse authors, characters, genres, and topics. Next slide. They build students' knowledge and vocabulary about topics in science, history, and current events, in addition to information about the authors and opportunities for students to make connections to the world around them. This building of knowledge and vocabulary is critical for comprehension, which makes it critical in closing opportunity gaps for those who may not have the same access and exposure to these ideas and topics outside of school. And I think this is really, really important. It's about, making sure the access is equitable. Next slide.
And Siobhan, oops, sorry, I would just add, if you could go back, Zena, just one slide, sorry, that the program is available with their Spanish translation at a click of a button if students need that. And there's read aloud similarly for students who really need that auditory kind of reading, that is also available just through a click of a button. Sorry, Siobhan, thank you.
With your permission, I am going to skip over the reading lesson. We're not going to demo it right now. That's a deeper dive, but I do want to now talk about math a little bit. Next slide, please. So math lessons include digital manipulation of familiar items, open-ended questions and tasks beyond multiple choice that replicate real-world math scenarios. And so again, really important to acknowledge that students may struggle with the concept or the content at first, or some students may find it extremely easy, and the program will adapt. Okay. Students do receive support and scaffolds as needed along the way. So in addition to the in-the-moment feedback, they get help from the program to support their learning. Similar to reading lessons, when students make an error, it provides additional information and questions to scaffold the students toward the correct answer. So it doesn't default right away to giving the answer. It tries to support children finding the answer out on their own. Okay. Again, I think we're just going to skip this for the sake of time. It is a video that you can engage with, and it will show you an idea, a model of a real world example or instruction that the students get in the program. Next, please. So this is really just to highlight the fact that there are also math learning games, and they are meant to be fun and engaging while still developing math fluency. So they're still able to target some of the areas that the students need, or some of the areas that are identified as the students' needed areas of work. They are aligned to the grade level domains, right? And they include real world scenarios like managing a pizza shop where they have to calculate the cost of ingredients, or determine the sale prices, and then trying to sell them fast enough by calculating orders before customers become enraged. I don't know if I can do that. But again, these games have value, but they are not, and this is important because if a student is doing this in one of your programs, you may want to know that these are fun, but they are not counted toward the instructional time, which we will get into a little bit later. There is time that students programs some of the stuff that the students are engaging in count toward their instructional time on iReady, and some of the things that they do are more about just them engaging, consistently engaging and having fun, but not counting toward the overall time recommended. Okay. All right, so I'm gonna try this one, Jen, but I know it's kind of more around data, but I know students, educators, parents, and guardians can view the student scores in reading and math by individual lessons and topics. If students don't pass a lesson, they will have an opportunity to try again and again. So this is the idea of, it's okay not to get it right the first time, and you will have another opportunity to try that same lesson. If they don't pass it, again, the program will then notify the teacher that they are struggling with a specific skill. And the domain will temporarily shut off to avoid causing frustration. The teacher will turn it back on once they've addressed the content with the student. So I think that's also really important to highlight, is if a student is getting it wrong multiple times, the program will shut down that domain so that the student is not getting frustrated, move them on, but the teacher will be alerted, or the parents may be alerted to know that this is something that the student needs more work on, and then they can turn the domain back on. Do you mind if I pass it back over to you here, Jen?
Of course. Thanks,
Thank you.
Siobhan.
You're welcome.
So when can students access the program? So as we already said, they can access it, kind of wherever, whenever. And families and providers can monitor the program usage in each student's homepage. What's important to note, families and after-school providers don't have their own login. Everything is accessed through the student login, which we'll go into in a moment. Our focus, as I said at the outset, is on student usage after school. Nothing supplants the work that a student does with an educator. And so really being clear about this wraparound service. I don't know if people know this, but in Cambridge, we have one of the shortest school days nationally. So more than ever, it's really important to think about, the totality of a student's day and, kind of all opportunities to engage in learning while remaining joyful and engaging. So there's been a lot of kind of research done on what kind of the sweet spot, if you will, for usage looks like. And what it is that students should aim for 45 to 50 minutes of instruction in iReady each week, each subject, which it might feel like a lot. So, I think one thing that we're recommending is, usually there's an area that a student needs to kind of do more practice on, between ELA and, reading ELA and math. So really thinking about maybe, kind of picking one of those areas, at least as students get started. And it's really important that students don't exceed these minutes. There is also a point at which there's diminishing returns if a student is using this too much. And this is something we're kind of closely monitoring. And as Siobhan mentioned, that time spent in games or within the dashboard right when they click on is not included in the student's recorded learning time. And we at the district and schools all have access to kind of how much time students are spending in the program, the lessons they're passing, so on and so forth. And as Siobhan mentioned, teachers are also paying attention to when students, kind of are struggling and need that kind of educator intervention and are doing so. Next slide, please. So how students log in is through ClassLink, which is how they access pretty much all of the technology that CPS pushes out. And all students should kind of well know that. And the information is here on how they access, if they have any questions, how they access it. But this is kids are pretty familiar with technology at this point, and we don't see kind of accessing the platform as being an issue at this point. So this is a lot of data, so I'll kind of pause and talk through it carefully. So as I mentioned, we can monitor usage and what usage looks like, and we have been, just to kind of understand how is rollout going so far. And what we see is, what this chart shows is the usage by school through the December holidays. So remember, we launched maybe November 8th, and this took us through, December 24th or so. And this is just kind of any logging in. This really doesn't show how much a student logged in or how much time they spent, just whether the percent of students who actually like logged into the program for personalized instruction. And what we see, and we've intentionally put the school level data here because you all support, my understanding is, specific schools. Most of you kind of work more closely with one or a handful of schools. So just to understand that there's a real range of usage playing out across our schools. And remember, our intent is not in this first year of in-school usage, it's really in out-of-school time usage. And unfortunately, we can't track usage when it happens in school versus out of school. So all we know is usage kind of, overall. The blue bar shows the percent of students who are using math, personalized instruction, and the pink bar shows what that looks like in reading. So really wide range, and we don't want to see such a range playing out across our schools. We really want to make sure that everyone kind of has the same opportunity to utilize the program. And it is really up to individual choice on whether a student or family chooses to do that. Next slide, please. Okay, this is a lot. So I'll just zero it in on grade 3, which is the first set of bars on the left. So one of our really, if you remember the data that we looked at in the beginning about just disparate impacts of COVID, we really are being very intentional on focusing our efforts on students who are furthest behind. When we look at our data, sorry, I'm getting a phone call, I have to mute it. When we look at our data, so let's play out our third grade, that first bar that we see, that's the blue and the pink. So that first bar that we see are our third graders who are 2 or more grade levels below on the fall iReady diagnostic. Remember, they first take the test to see where they place. What we see is that 49% of those students are using personalized instruction in math, and 68% of the students are using in reading. When we shift to the right, we look at third graders who are performing mid or above, which are students who are performing at or above grade level. And we see very different data, at least in math. 71% of those students are using personalized instruction in math, and 65% are in reading. So more kind of parity in reading, but more of disparate usage in math. We really want to ensure that students who are furthest behind are, have the access and the opportunity to use the program and can do so in whatever kind of spaces they're in out of school. Next slide, please. I think I'm handing it over to Kari right now.
Yeah, thank you, Jen. And I know it's a lot of information, so thanks for bearing with us. We'll be sharing the slides and you can review them as well as some of the links after the workshop. And of course, you can loop back to us with questions beyond the workshop, just to be clear. That last graph, you don't need to go back to it, but sort of one thing it pointed out, and Jen said this, but just to reiterate, it's showing a pattern of, for some students, they, for whatever reasons, we don't know all the reasons yet, but what we're trying to do is create more equitable access so that access is not the issue. The students who need it more are not getting it as much as those who maybe need it less. And so that's one way to think about it, is like we want to definitely try to level the disparities in terms of usage when we can. And we also saw, I think, on those graphs that math is more extreme in terms of the differences, and so I just wanted to point that out. So this slide here, as you can see, is really talking about different ways that these minutes could be chopped up. And a version of this was shared with parents and caregivers as well, just to think about, at home, how you might try to encourage your students to use iReady. But for many of our students, they're not accessing this at home. They may not have the technology at home. They may not have the time. They may not have the supports. And so in your programs, the question or maybe challenge for you all is to consider, is there a way that we could more seamlessly allow students to use iReady in some different ways, chopping it up, maybe 20 minutes one day, 25 another, or as you see here, 15 minutes, 3 different days. And, talking with folks, prior to this workshop, it's clear that, programs for forever basically have had options for students to do homework or to do learning activities and choice activities. There's, arrival time that is staggered because of our school bell schedule. There's different opportunities, and we'll, in our breakout groups in a moment, you have a chance to chat about this. But so this is very much just about like the amount of minutes, not when it's happening, but just to think about the variety of creative ways that perhaps you could support students. Yeah, and then of course we could get them to wake up early a Saturday morning and jump on and do it then. I mean, once they have the access, they may, more of them might jump on, but it's not a given for sure. Is this one mine or back to you, Jen?
I'm happy to take it, Kari, if you want. Okay, great. So really, what is our ask? What is it that we're kind of putting out into the universe for all of you to consider respectfully? Is helping us on this goal of creating equitable access in out-of-school time for students, particularly those, who are most in need of support. And by doing that, we were thinking, creating a schedule, carving out time, thinking about that schedule that Zena had just had up, that Kari talked through. It could be 20 minutes per day, 15 minutes per day. A lesson takes about 15 minutes to get through, so you wouldn't want to do it less than 15 minutes a day because a student wouldn't be able to complete a lesson. For students to do iReady, again, that goal of 45 to 50 minutes of instruction in each week in each subject, and just helping us support that effort and create more kind of equitable data as we looked at that data, the pink and blue, across our schools, across student performance. We also thought it would be helpful just to support this goal is helping students track usage so that we're really intentional, helping support students, knowing where they are against those number of minutes. And I've linked here some resources that come from iReady, which are just simple data trackers that could be printed out or kind of could be downloaded electronically, or programs could create on their own, just to help visualize that progress. And then thirdly, we're really trying to keep reinforcing the homeschool after school connection, communicating usage with parents. And there's these certificates that are linked here that could be used to say, oh, so-and-so met their weekly or monthly goal, so that parents know where students are relative to these goals. So that's what I had. Next slide, please. Please do, Kari.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks. And Jen and Siobhan, and also I know Emily has spoken on this and past opportunities and workshops. Like the rollout of iReady across the schools, across the grades, across teachers, although it was rolled out district-wide, I guess I want to reemphasize it hasn't really been consistently rolled out, right? So just an important piece of context on, and the graphs, particularly like from school to school usage, has a lot to do maybe with how that school is rolling it out, and or how they may have used it. And we could definitely use richer data in terms of usage, but getting that snapshot does tell a story that's important for us to know. The other thing that came up for me when you were sharing this is we have, I think, some, maybe clarify this for me, Siobhan or Jen. There were, I thought, some teachers who may be assigning iReady as homework, but they also are giving other homework. And so our kids are showing up at our programs. They may have had very different sort of asks or awareness of the use of iReady in their classroom, in their school, what their teacher's asking for. There are also other learning platforms still in use. So this would be a good time, I think, just to give like a little bit of that context. And I'm glad we didn't do this in the beginning because it kind of makes things feel so muddled, but just, I want you to know that, and those of you at the programs, I see Jada saying yes, because you all are experiencing this, you see what your kids are pulling out and working on. So Jen or Siobhan, if you want to just, anything you want to add to that.
Jen, can I start and then you kind of take it home? I think, as with anything, there's an adjustment period. We are trying our hardest to create alignment and consistency across the district in many areas, one being the iReady rollout. So what you currently will see is that some schools are, I don't want to say more invested, because it may just be that they're trying to fit it in and trying to figure out how to pivot to the use of iReady as being something that they really engage all of their students and families into. So yes, you are right, Kari. There are schools that have decided to use this platform as their primary source of homework assignment. And so they will assign the iReady personalized instruction as the student's homework assignment for the night. There are some schools that they feel, and they will self-identify that they have not yet been able to figure out how to really get it into the students or the family's purview, and knowing that there are also some access issues to Chromebooks is playing an important piece to some students not really accessing the platform yet. So that's another thing. Now, there are, and I'm going to address, I think, the other point you're making, there were some programs that existed before iReady came along that some schools are still using, and that is definitely true. As of this year, with me taking on this role next year, there were some requests for additional platforms or technology for the same purposes that were not approved, because as we slowly shift to this being a district initiative, we are asking that folks do not take on new electronic resources and use them instead of iReady. We really want them to focus on iReady. And so what we are looking at now this year are the programs that are currently being used and that were being used before iReady came along, and really trying to compare what they are exposing students to. Are they doing the same thing as iReady? Because if so, we are going to ask that the shift be made to iReady. And if they are doing something different, what does that look like? And what does that address that is so different than what iReady is addressing? Right now, I will say one of the biggest things out there is ST Math. And ST Math is something that we are doing in the K-5 classrooms. And that is actually a program that is being used in the classroom. Whereas iReady is primarily focused to the out of class time for students. And so that is the big difference between those two. Other ones that I can think about are like IXL. I do know it's out there. We are looking at it. I know there's Symphony, and I think there might be a couple others that we're trying to look at. So I'm not sure if I answered the question, but that's just some of the information I know, and hopefully that is helpful.
And I would just add on, in terms of Chromebook access, we were really intentional about, that there's a kind of varying degree of, technology at home, and we certainly didn't want to contribute to opportunity gaps. So our tech department set aside a significant number of Chromebooks to support this effort, and principals were told to request Chromebooks for families that need it. And those Chromebooks could be used all year to support this effort. There's a little bit of a logistical piece to that, where families have to sign a consent, that they'll kind of take care of the Chromebook, but they can be turned around really quickly. And so, but I think one thing we have to think about too is, thinking about third graders bringing devices from school to out of school time, home and back again. So that's something that we're doing some intentional thinking about right now.
And Jen, I also want to add that my answer was pretty math heavy for obvious reasons, and that I do want to acknowledge that there are other programs going on as well on the ELA side. I think Lexia might be one. So Emily is aware of that as well, and is trying to work on clarifying the different needs of each one.
Thank you both. So I think it's important for a program to know, or staff or folks to know that, our job is not to sort of tell students don't use these other programs or this is wrong at this juncture. It's just to be aware that the overall goal of the district and what schools are being told is to start to, I won't say phase out, but to focus more on the use of iReady. And some schools have done that transition more quickly than others from what we're hearing and what we're experiencing. And I can see it with my own kid. So I'll just put that out there. And I think lastly, I'll say that conversations with the kids, I mean, they know what's going on, or it's also telling what they don't know. So I'll put this out there as well. If there's like lessons that you're learning and we don't have time to discuss them all at the workshop today, some of them may come up in the breakout groups that we're about to get into, but we're very interested in sort of what is being learned beyond the school day, as always.
Kari, I forgot one really important point, and I'm sorry, I don't know how we didn't mention it, but I'm sure it's on people's minds. The program is really intended for independent use. So it's not intended for, an after-school program staff person or family member to be sitting next to a student while completing it and supporting them with any help that they have. I mean, if a student had a question, sure, an adult could answer it, but it's really intended for that independent practice. So it's really just about creating the time and the schedule, not supporting it kind of in kind.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll just revisit one last thing around the Chromebooks. And I've mentioned in some of the emails we've sent out, and Jen just alluded to it, that we are working with the district to try to identify resources so that we could have Chromebooks available for some programs, potentially to hold for the use of, to be used by younger students in particular. I think our middle grade students are pretty proficient at carrying it back and forth with their heavy backpacks at this point. But for the younger ones, if we could allow or create an opportunity for y'all to have like a bank of like 5 Chromebooks that you could keep securely. We're looking into resources real time, trying to get an answer about that this week or in the very near future. So an update would come about that. And if you have a real need for that, like you don't have a computer lab or you don't think, your program could do it. I see Norma saying that was a question, like we're going to have a way, definitely just reach out to me directly. And so I can take note of who's interested and who has, that request, if we can get these resources lined up. All right, next slide. Okay, so we're going to move into breakouts now. And what we'll do with our rusty Zoom skills is we will get you into breakouts and then we'll post the questions, at least we'll try to, in the breakouts. But if you can, or put them in the chat or whatever, maybe I can do that as we talk, but I'll read them out loud. So these will be breakout groups of about 3, I think is where we landed. Is that right? And we have 3 questions and we'll take about 10 minutes for you all to discuss. And so here are the questions. What are some ways, or when could you imagine that students could use iReady at your program? Right. So you can, that part of the discussion can be based on sort of like ways that you already are using learning time, other tools you might be using, creative ways you fit it into your schedule, anything of that nature. This is like the how you are able to maybe do this, how you can imagine or how you already do. And then what barriers or challenges do you anticipate to this effort? And then are there any additional supports or information that you or your staff would need to support this work? Welcome back, everyone. So why don't we open it up right away here for share outs. If anybody just wants to lift up any of the important ideas or questions, barriers or resources that came up in your breakout conversations. And then we also will have a Q&A segment following the share outs. So there might be some overlap, but maybe it's so maybe emphasize maybe some of the ideas and maybe some of the resources first, but do what you want. Just go off mute or raise your hand. Whichever,
like
whichever
Jordan
has. Yeah.
Jordan, yep, I see you.
Yep, thank you.
Yep.
So in my group, we kind of had 2 different perspectives on the disclaimer that it's kind of intended for independent practice. And for context at our programs, I was thinking this would be very useful for us because each of our students is matched 1-to-1 with a volunteer tutor. And up until that disclaimer, I was thinking this would be perfect to have an adult sitting with them and, if questions arise, helping them with that. But after that, I kind of wanted clarification on if there still could be a role for like an adult to kind of see what's going on, maybe passively like take notes or notice what's going on and then bring it during or after, or just, you know, what that role could be specifically for our program. And I know it was kind of a question with Jody too on like how you can support like a student there, or it can be hands off.
That's an excellent question. And I will go back to the company just to clarify because we haven't gotten that level of a question. I think the idea is that it's really like for the most part intended to be independent. But, you know, I think thinking about I think there are roles that adults can play if we're really intentional about what that looks like. We don't want the adult helping them answer questions necessarily, but there could be an opportunity to help resolve productive struggle, you know, around a concept or an idea. And what we didn't cover is at the end of every lesson, there's a quiz. And as Siobhan also mentioned, as students get questions wrong kind of throughout the lesson, there are these like pop-ups that come up to do differentiated kind of scaffolding. And I could see that's where an adult could help like talk through the content that's tricky. Like that would actually be, I think, like pretty ideal, but I don't want to misrepresent the intent. And so we will follow up with that and get that back to the group. I don't know if anyone on my team wants to add anything to that.
I can add that another way to think about this, or an additional way, I should say, is as a homework assignment might kind of come to you, and you know your role is not to help the kids like finish the homework or like answer the question for them, but you could observe where the struggles are occurring. And with this tool, I think, Jordan, I kind of heard you maybe infer that you could almost structure it in a certain kind of way where you would take some notes, and then maybe once the kid logs off, there's an opportunity for a conversation, or maybe prior to the next time the young person gets on, that tutor or that staff person could have a conversation about, oh, I noticed you were working on this last time, or this is a skill that it looks like you were doing well at, or something that's challenging, or conversationally. And I think there is some fluidity to this at the end of the day. I mean, Jen, we know this is still being rolled out. And, you know, the last thing I'll say is like at home, literally at home, a parent or caregiver, again, we're trying to entrust in them that they also aren't doing something that misrepresents sort of what the student is able to do independently. So I hope that's helpful.
Can I chime in?
Oh, go ahead, Siobhan.
I'm going to chime in from a parent perspective, if you don't mind. And I'm going to say that, you know, I'm very open with kind of the profile of both my children. And one of my children in particular struggles a bit with certain content, right? And when he was given a program to work on independently, as a parent, I was like, oh my gosh, you know, I'm so used to sitting next to him and doing his homework with him and keeping him focused that I was worried that this was going to be problematic and that he was just never going to get it done. This program has really actually helped my student learn how to work independently. My child will work independently. Will that be the case for all children? You know, absolutely not. But I think me giving him the opportunity to do this independently gave him not only a sense of confidence that he was doing something independently, but it has now opened doors for him to show him that he can learn independently. And it's only 15 minutes, like it's not a long period of time. So I think it would actually be a disservice to not allow the students to engage with this or any program independently and know that not only are you teaching them the subject matter, but you're actually teaching them how to engage in their own learning from an independent perspective. So that's just my personal kind of parent lens.
And I guess I would just add one more thing, sorry, and then we'll shift to Danielle and Jen's question, is that, yeah, that passive, like, you know, by viewing what the student is doing, remember the program is based off of how the student did on the diagnostic test. So the content that will come up is linked to what that student needs to work on, which then is going to be informative for how, you know, a tutor would kind of continue that support outside of the program, if that makes any sense. And I would love to, I know there's ongoing conversations around data privacy and data sharing, and I don't know where all of that stands, and I'll follow up with Kari, but you know, there could be opportunities to kind of, I don't know how much programs are in touch with parents, but parents could share the diagnostic report that really shows at the domain level where a student is to really provide that targeted support in that space. So anyway, I hope that helps. And Danielle and Jen.
Hi, so we just wanted to share that for our program, like we're not very strict with homework policies, but we were thinking like to motivate the students, we would, you know, have them like take turns and do like 15 minutes and then maybe of the lesson and then like 5 minutes to incentivize them 5 minutes of game time or something. So that might be an idea. And I had also, thanks. And I also had a question. So we were talking about the student login. So if like students are not using it in class, do we create those logins for them? And then do the parents use the same login, you know, and the teachers to see all the assessment data? Like, is there a section where like only the parents and the teacher can access and the kids don't access? How does that work?
That's a great question. So students will access the program through ClassLink, which is really the main kind of button that they go through for every kind of program in the district. So even a third grader would be very familiar with kind of that process. And if you encounter any challenges, you have all of our emails. You can certainly feel free to contact us with any of those questions. And sorry, someone just knocked on the door and I'm distracted. Your second question, the dashboard and everyone kind of sees the same thing. So actually teachers see different things, but parents see what kids see because parents don't have their own login. There's only a student login. And so by virtue of that, parents would see whatever students see. Does that answer your question?
Okay. Oh, hi. And then I was going to ask, yes, that does answer my question. But then let's say we want to share the assessment data with the parents. And do we just print that out or how does that work?
So we at the district level, so right now we're doing diagnostic testing in the fall and then in the winter right now. And after those diagnostic testing windows, we both email home and print mail home reports on how the student did on those tests. So those are really great opportunities to engage with your families about, sharing that perhaps with the program, again, so that there's targeted supports that can happen around what the students' kind of, areas of challenge and strength are. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, great.
And do we know, is Benjamin Banneker also using iReady? We do have a handful of kids that come from there.
I think they are.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or just share outs what's kind of, I think Jess?
Yes, hi. So if our students don't take the diagnostic in their public school, are we expected to administer them? Because I know the diagnostic can be really long and kind of like tough when like they ask harder questions for the kiddos and stuff.
Yes, that is not the responsibility of the program. The diagnostic is the responsibility of the school.
Okay.
And so kids, we didn't make this point. Students can only access the personalized instruction if they've taken the diagnostic.
So if they don't take the diagnostic, then iReady just wouldn't be accessible to those kiddos. Okay.
Exactly. And play out what, like in what scenario are you thinking about?
We just our program has kiddos from all over Cambridge. So I was just thinking if certain schools like don't prioritize it over. Yeah, because I just know it can be like a timely. I like worked with it like 2 years ago, so I know it could take a little longer for the older kiddos. So I don't know if like it gets like lost in the shuffle if a kid's absent 2 days in a row or something.
It can, but it's really a priority. And we work very closely with schools to ensure that we're as close to 100% completion as possible because it is an equity issue. It's not really up to, if a student has extenuating circumstances around test anxiety or something along those lines, then obviously, there's different decisions made. But it's really, there's a lot of accommodations that are built in to kind of support kids along the way. I hope that
In an attempt to be helpful, can you help me answer this part of the question? I'm new to the after school piece, and so I don't know about EL level ones, Jen, in terms of if any of these after school programs would be servicing those students, and if so, you know, the requirement for taking the diagnostic and engaging with iReady is a little different.
Yeah, so EL English learners who are very beginning with very beginning English skills, EL ones are exempt from all district screeners. And I'm sorry, I don't know if everyone knows this, just the language around it. Students who are EL 2 are exempt from the reading screener, but not math, which is in line with the MCAS requirements. And then students with English language development 3 to 5 are expected to participate in all district screeners. And iReady has Spanish, and if anyone's working at Amigos, they are also doing the Spanish diagnostic with their students. So just as an FYI. Emily?
Let me just also add before Emily, just if you have any questions about specific students or kids from specific schools or anything of that nature, don't hesitate to reach out to me directly. And I'm working in coordination with all these folks. But this is that's an area that I'm often helping to kind of be that bridge between schools and out of schools time, after schools, I should say. And then I'm also about to post the slides in the chat from today. Go ahead, Emily.
I just had a quick question. In our group, we were talking a lot about the barriers and how, especially the younger kids don't have Chromebooks, as you've talked about. That's an ongoing discussion. Does the program work on phones, on tablets, or is it just mostly computer? It can work on tablets,
but not phones. And there's actually an FAQ that we have posted, I think on one of the last slides. It talks about the requirements around like iPads. Like there's certain, I don't know, that I'm not a tech person, but it kind of which ones kind of work with the program and which ones don't. But for the most part, it should work on tablets.
Thank you.
Yep.
That was a great question. I never thought to ask that about phones.
Yeah, no, it was. I had a lot of programs asking if kids could use phones because they do their homework on phones. Any other, share outs, any other questions that haven't come up yet? Any other?
I have a question. So if young people are supposed to be working on this like independently in an after school setting, if there's a group of young people like in that space that wants working on it individually, would you prefer them wearing headphones so people are not like in each other's like mix, or is it okay for that just to like be out there?
Melinda, that's an excellent question. I hadn't even thought about that. Headphones, yes, but actually, Kari, that makes me realize that should be part of our request that we're making of the district, that we help provide headphones to programs. Excellent point, because it would be super distracting because there is a really strong audio component of it, and that would be really hard for other people. Yeah, great point.
Yeah, that's how they do it in the schools too, so it's a great point.
Hi, I have a question. Sorry, I don't know how to raise my hand. So I have a question. Some of the students that we work with have said that, well, the teacher hasn't assigned it, so I can access it. Is it true that teachers really need to assign the lesson for them to be able to go and practice, or how does that work?
Excellent question. That is a misnomer. No. So and we should have pulled it up. There is, when kids log on, there's like a big icon that says My Path, or like Teacher Path, I think. Teacher Path, I think I might be calling it wrong, is the teacher assigned, but My Path will be there no matter what. And that is what is kind of generated once the student takes the diagnostic. So they'll click into that. And I'm sorry, we should have had a visual of that. Maybe, we'll add it to the slides.
And I actually think this is really important, Jen, because the students may not know this. So this is important for you guys to know, because we don't know if the students are getting this information.
Exactly, because there's such a varying degree. I mean, working across the district, we just can't control the messaging. And so that's an excellent point. When kids log on, they will see My Path, and that's what they will click into. And we'll come up with like a one pager for programs. So you don't have to go through all the slides. We'll come up with a one pager. Oh, sorry, I didn't see the order. Chris.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, just some follow-up questions from that. Most of our kiddos in our school age program come from Kalo and King Open, which I noticed were on the far end of that chart that haven't had a ton of experience. So yeah, just wondering, I guess it just seems like we'll have a couple more steps of like, if the kids haven't been exposed to a lot at school, making sure that if our staff are really maybe some of the first people guiding them through this, that we have everything that we need.
Absolutely. And Chris,
we are excited that you are here.
Yeah, we actually just met with the principal, Siobhan and I, with the principal of Kalo, talking very much about that data. And she was so excited that we were doing this training. And really, you know, she brought up East End House as, you know, one of the critical partners. So we'd be happy with any program to do kind of more of like a one-on-one follow-up, just to make sure you feel adequately supported to do this work. I know like a big training like this doesn't really hit the mark for everyone. So please reach out if that would be helpful to any of you.
Yeah, no, I think Jess is also on this call and she's the program director, and luckily she's had a lot of experience, as she mentioned, working with this, but more the diagnostic. But yeah, just making sure, and also trying to understand the timeline of when you're hoping that we can start doing this work, because like, as we've talked about, having the technology available to us, and then also just our program schedule. Like we have some grants and we have other folks coming in and homework. And it seems like at least these schools, the kiddos they have other homework that's not iReady. So just thinking about the work it will take on our end to rearrange schedules and things before we're able to really dive into this.
Yeah, I don't think we have a hard and fast timeline. I think that we know these things take time to implement. I will say, as I mentioned, students are testing right now, and the personalized instruction path kind of regenerates once the new data comes in, because it really wants to meet kids where they are, knowing that they've made progress since the fall. So this is a great opportunity. The window goes until February break. So really thinking about that kind of time period, maybe coming back from February break to kind of launch if you don't feel quite equipped to do that now. Yeah, but we don't have a hard and fast timeline. But
I was actually going to say the same thing, Jen. Kari and I were talking about February break and the opportunities over that break, but I think that would be a great kind of soft date to aim for.
And
yeah,
so
Chris,
just a follow-up question.
Chris,
Well,
sorry, I just wanted to mention your question around sort of the patterns of homework that might be coming, or sort of any questions of that nature. It may be worthwhile, since you have a significant number of students from particular schools, that you reach out to point people at those schools and ask some of these questions of them, and say, you know, what is it looking like in terms of the use of iReady as a homework, you know, supplement, or as an option, or just kind of getting their current communication around it, or sort of what they foresee as the next phase of that rollout, so that you aren't totally in the dark, given that you're trying to figure it out through your kids' usage. So that's just a suggestion. I'm not promising it would give you all the answers you need, but you can also reach out directly to the schools of your kiddos.
And specifically at Kalo, I know the principal is really on board with this, so she'd probably be really helpful.
Great, thanks. And then I guess just the follow-up is if the technology component, because again, like we don't have the resources to be helping, you know, 40 students go through this process. So just if the technology would be, you know, if we could partner with you folks on that tech.
You were the reason, this meeting at Kalo was the reason why we came up with this idea that we needed to kind of figure out ways to get Chromebooks into some of our partners' hands. So I think Kari will be following up very shortly. We have kind of work underway to make that happen.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you. So I'm noticing we're up against the clock here. Are there any other burning questions that you want to vocalize, or if not, if you want to put anything in the chat? And beyond that, I think, is there anything else, Jen or Siobhan?
That is it. I just really want to say thank you. Like, this is amazing.
Yeah, our deep appreciation for all the work you do every day on behalf of our kids, with our kids and families, and we're just all very grateful. So thank you.
Okay. And in the spirit of this not being a one-off, we will have some other communications that come out, particularly to participants who attended today, I should say. And we'll hopefully give an opportunity for folks who want to maybe come back together for another session to reflect, like later in the spring, about how things are going. I would offer that as an idea. And so we'll venture out and kind of see how that can work. We appreciate you being here, and feel free to bring this topic into other spaces where you're with out of school time practitioners as appropriate. Okay. All right, folks.
Thank you, everybody.